So Mike and I are having some amazing conversations, I think, about executive alignment. If you've just come in on the back of that conversation, you might be thinking, what's the planet Earth and the millions of miles around it got to do with that? Well, maybe if you watch the series, then you'll get deeper insight into where we were going with that. So thank you for that, Mike. I think what I'm thinking is that there are, when you first sort of, let's just say that you have been contacted, or by somebody, or you're in their coaching assignment, and there's clearly some elements of misalignment, or there's somebody comes and says, I need your help. Okay. What are the things that, where do you start, I suppose, would be my question. Where do you start, given everything that we've talked about today?
We start with, what do you want? What are your choices? What are your options? What are the risks associated with those things? And the fact is, there's almost always going to be misalignment. I wouldn't have a job, right? I wouldn't be able to do this incredible work if people weren't really, really complicated. And, alignment's the goal. It's what we strive for, but it's never a static place that we get to. Because guess what? We're going to have incredible leaders in the organization, but they have to succession plan, or an illness pops up in the family, and all of a sudden their values change, and they go, I actually don't need to work here for another 10 years. I've been able to retire, because I've been really successful financially in my career. And now I have a sick child, or I have a sick cousin, or a family member, and I want to be there for them. I want to support the family. And they may not have put the time and the energy into ensuring that the person who takes their place exhibits those same behaviors. And so what you'll have, and I promise I'll be quiet here quickly, but what you'll have is all of the people who used to look up to this individual, they have an expectation that that individual used to lean into, align to, behave within. And then somebody else steps into that role, and they're set up for failure because that person is almost never going to perfectly align to the attributes that they liked in that other person. And so it creates another challenge where we're not robots, and we are going to shift and change and grow. And just when we think we're there, just when we think we've made it and everything's it's going to be a good week, the universe laughs and goes, how about this? What about this? Deal with that. You didn't think you were walking into this today, but you are.
Yeah. So those are great opening questions, right? So you're getting people to reflect on what you want, what's important for you, where do you think you are at this moment in time in relation to work, happiness, health, all of those things. What comes next?
So let me tell you what I don't want to do when it comes to executive alignment. Okay.
Yeah.
What I don't want to do is open discussion. Let's talk about our problems as a group. Okay. I don't want to do that. The potential for the status differentials, the bias, the unique perspectives to just snowball into immense conflict and make things worse, again, is far too prevalent. What I do prefer to do is have unique, confidential discussions around or with each individual who's a part of the project. Because it's not until we do that that we're going to feel that and create that safety where we can work on some very honest opportunities for that person. Because what one executive needs to work on is very different from the next executive. One executive might be going through a divorce. They might be going through something very challenging, and another executive might be all about business and all about process and how do I develop this particular opportunity that I have. And so it ensures that equal attention is paid equally to the things that are important to each individuals. And once we start building some momentum there, now it might be okay to encourage the executive team to come together and share a little bit about what they're working on, what they're learning about themselves, what they've overcome, what's worked, what's not worked. What part of the core values are they in alignment to? What struggles might they have related to where the organization would like to be or grow into?
Mm.
One thing we have to appreciate, again, I'll be quiet after this, but um, I will often say organizations have an infinite capacity to take more. So if you give and give and give, you better believe there's an organization that's willing to take and take and take. And
Yep. Yep.
everyone is going to set boundaries very differently. And so someone like me
Yep.
can kind of come in and support the facilitation of that to understand, are we feeling good about this energy or are we not feeling good about this energy? And why is that
Mm.
so? And do we want to do anything about that? And
Mm.
again, what are the risks? What are the opportunities associated with doing some of that
Mm.
vulnerable
Mm.
work?
Mm. That to me is so important, that you are honoring individuals, the before the idea of, the exec, the individual work is so important, I think, right? And through experience, I think this is what we kind of know in a funny kind of way, although again, reflecting on bias, there we go. I think that the other thing that comes to mind is that people at the beginning, sometimes when you're doing work, it seems to not matter, um, maybe the makeup of a team, makeup of an individual doesn't really matter. If we start looking at some of the tools that we use, when we're doing some psychometric work, people can sometimes get really excited, I find, because they're learning something about themselves. Once they've taken it, they learn something about themselves that they weren't sure about. They can also react differently to some things that they find. And I'm mindful that at the beginning of some of this work, people say, "Oh, so we shall we share? Should we share everything with our colleagues?" And I always say no, don't do that, because what you've got is something very personal. And at the point when it feels mutually trusting, mutually acceptable to share in some things about yourself, to be a bit vulnerable, maybe do it then. Not just because you've suddenly got some new insight into yourself. In other words, take this information into who you are and understand what this means, and don't feel compelled to just suddenly tell everybody. um, but do that with intention, and as you said earlier, do that gracefully. um, and I think, to me, there's sometimes a bit of, I'd even say a bit of naivety that exists sometimes around this, that I don't know why I'm saying that. Maybe I need to reflect on that, but anyway, I've put it out there now.
Well,
So
so here's what's interesting, right? This is where the group work can really shine, because what we provide are tools and training, and most importantly, terminology and language that
mhm,
is shared, that people go, oh, okay, I can align to this concept, or here's my issue with that concept or with that tool. And we go, oh, well, let's talk about that. And is that something you want to develop? Is that something we want to shy away from? Again, leveraging and recognizing choice. We can't hold people accountable. People have to choose to want to be accountable. Okay.
mhm,
And so when we think about coaching, coaching is dialogue between individuals where we're exploring and building awareness around what we can, will, and want to be accountable for. Oftentimes in the workplace, we are moving so quickly, we have the blinders on so much that we don't even do that legwork. We don't say, what's within your capabilities right now? What's your capacity? Are you able to carry another assignment or project? Because we think that we can just keep giving people more work and keep piling it up, and that'll put fire under their butt and they'll work harder. That worked brilliantly 100 years ago, when the majority of work was manual labor, and we could threaten people to release stress chemicals that would encourage their body's ability to engage in more physical exertion. Today, we put fires under people's butt, we apply urgency and pressure, and we get the opposite, because it has a negative correlation with high quality brain functioning, well being, regulation of sleep, regulation of mood, right? There's so many things.
mhm,
It's so easy to make these things worse. So, That's where having alignment in the language that we use, whether that's psychometric assessments, whether that's emotional intelligence, whether that's models, tools, processes that we have in the organization, and hold up the mirror to say we're allowed to have a difference of opinion associated with these things or these words. We're
Mm,
allowed to connect better with individuals who have this attribute of behavior or emotional intelligence or motivation, because we
mm,
learn, oh, I know that individual provides significant value to the organization, but we're going to constantly clash because they have a particular motivation or value that's very different than mine. And the moment we
mhm,
honor it, we're more likely to subjectively own it and say, I'd really like to hear what they would do in this context because I know what I would do. And I want to go to someone who's not going to validate. They're going to not necessarily disagree. They're going to give me something different for me to think about,
mm,
to consider.
mm.
And again, that comes from trust, safety, camaraderie. And that's where we
Yeah.
really start to pick up momentum in an organization for
Mm.
sure.
So I would say that, I mean, I believe I have experienced it, that you have people who only seek validation from others, and that becomes their leadership way of being. Is that, I've got people who are gonna maybe in some of the research, it's called the halo effect a little bit. Where you
Okay.
surround yourself with people who kind of see the good in you, but don't see the other bits, and kind of ignore that. And there's potentially uh, real potential for derailing yourself, other people in the organization in that regard. So,
So
what do you think?
let's label it. Okay. The label I have for what you're describing is negative validation cycles. Okay. And what happens with, and I'll give lots of context for this, so I don't want to lose anyone. Okay. So what happens is when I'm in conflict with somebody else, okay, I don't go to someone who's going to contradict me if I want to process it, complain about it, vent about it. I go to someone that I already trust, that I already know unconsciously is going to align with me and agree with me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that that's you and you and I have found a common enemy. They're rude, they're dismissive, we perceive them as having an ego, and they just led a toolbox meeting. They just did an annual performance review with the team, and you and I, we didn't score well or we didn't like it. And so I come up to you and I go, hey, Lee, so can't wait to talk to you about this. And I vent, and then you go, yeah, what a beep, what a horrible situation. Once again, this is why we don't like working here. Can't wait to, be scolded again, whatever that is. What happens is the moment you and I validate each other, two things happen. My relationship with you improves, and I'm less likely to bring attention to what I've agreed on with you with that person
Mm,
because you agree with me. Therefore, I'm in the right. Why would I try and change their mind? Because somebody else already sees it my way.
mm,
This
mm-hmm,
impacts the narratives that people have in their brain, and it changes the physical way in which they interpret and perceive reality based on some of those narratives. Now, I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole on some of those things, but that's something we need to be aware of, is to say part of the reason why the psychological safety, the trust, the relationship, the respect is so important is that people will actually say, excuse me, could you try communicating that again? I felt your first rendition was offensive. I really felt dismissed. I really felt like that was, not delivered well. And we have enough respect for each other that I'm willing to give you an opportunity to see my pain and discomfort in a way that you have a choice to do something about it. Now you can double down, but if you double down, you're far more likely to predict what's going to happen next because I've already told you I've been offended or I'm not feeling good about the way that you presented something.
mm-hmm,
Okay.
mm-hmm,
But the moment I don't have a relationship with that person, they do something I don't like, I turn my back on them and I go to the person that's going to validate me. That creates the negative validation cycle.
mm,
That leads to the antithesis of a productive culture in the workplace. and more
Absolutely.
meetings after the meetings and more headaches for HR.
Mm. I've often thought about that kind of thing as having, you know, illegitimate conversations in lieu of the legitimate ones. So, you know, the good, just, you know, maybe the word's the wrong word, but it but
That certainly
it's
got
like,
me.
yeah, well, there we go, you know, and like, so we're proving as we do it that language is important, but, you know, the conversation that we're talking about is how to deal with the idea that you can engage with somebody who you have really different values, opinions, beliefs from, recognizing that when you get through those things and find, you know, the right kind of level to be with each other, the real conversation happens, as opposed to if you don't do that. I mean, it's a bit black and white in the way I'm saying it, but if you don't do that, the other conversations happen. Yeah. And those other conversations aren't leading you anywhere, you know, in relation to the positive alignment, the positive culture that we're talking about, even though in order to get there, there's a harder route, but the harder route often, well, always will bear greater fruit, right? I'm putting it in a different way,
Right.
but I feel like I'm saying the same thing, but that's how it's kind of, you know, manifested in me.
Well, let's connect this back to culture and the importance of quality leadership, okay? Because what you described as illegitimate conversations, we have to recognize that they are always legitimate conversations for those who are in the pain and discomfort. And the
Yeah.
moment we try to dismiss, now that wasn't your intention using the words illegitimate, that's just me nitpicking your words. But we have to recognize that the way in which we think about someone else's engagement with another person, whether productive or not, it's going to change the language, it's going to change the energy that we bring into that conversation. And again, remember, I was saying earlier that if someone feels like they're being communicated with as if they are an obstacle or a problem, it's going to get worse. It is
Mm,
not going to lead to I'm open, I'm receptive, I'm accepting, I want to learn. It's going to go to armor up, wall up. I'm right, you're wrong. But because you're higher status than me, here's what I'm going to do. You're going to be talking down to me like this, telling me what I need to improve on. You're going to be giving me all kinds of unsolicited feedback that I didn't ask you for, that I don't care about. But I'm going to go, oh, mm-hmm. Oh, oh, that's a good point. Yeah. And then things will improve from the leader's perspective for exactly 2 weeks. And then we're going to
mm,
default back to the behavior that was trying to be avoided in the first place because we
mm,
never got to the source of the issue. What we did was we doused the fire with a bit of water, but
mm,
we didn't get all of it. So we didn't get to the true source. So it kicks up into a
mm.
flame again.
And you know, just reflecting on my words and your words, the thing that's making me chuckle inside is that when the context of a legitimate conversation, I suppose, is taking us towards what you're talking about, you know, which is it's in that context, but there's no question that when the word I use, this other conversation, what I call the illegitimate conversation, they're totally legitimate because they make us feel better, because they make us feel validated in a different way, but they don't tackle the actual the issue, if you want to call it
Okay,
an issue. You
and
know, I want to call it
and
an
what
issue.
happens? Okay, so I like the word catalyze, like to think of a kiln, right?
Yeah.
We have squishy clay that's malleable, and then we put it into a kiln, it gets fired, and now it's hard, right? It's static, it's contextual, it's structured, right? So what happens is I have a perception, I don't feel good about it. I go to someone that validates me. They go, "Oh, I believe you. I've had that same experience. Oh, prepare for more of that. Well, you might want to start if you have a problem with the way that he talked in that meeting, just wait until we get to year end and we don't hit our targets. Like, you better start polishing your resume now." What happens is that catalyzes the belief that I have. It makes it more real. And so again, that it really changes the way in which I engage, because now it's fundamentally real. It's not just me who's seeing it, somebody else who I like, who I agree with, who I have a good relationship with, they see it, they agree with me, so now it's far more real. And because they gave me the permission, they checked the box for me, I'm not going to the other person, because we just realized that why would we have that conversation in the first place? Because this person, maybe they tell me a story about when they tried and they were shot
Mm,
down. Right. And again,
mm,
that comes back to old school leadership styles, command and control. I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're small. I'm right, you're wrong. Right. And that's
mm,
where that toxicity can really come in. Now, guess what? Nothing wrong with having arrogance if you own it. Nothing wrong with having a big ego if you own it. Nothing wrong with liking control if you communicate it and people get an opportunity to participate in it with you. Because not everyone shows up to work who wants a lot of control, wants a lot of responsibility. They're really comfortable to just own their part. And if somebody
mm.
else wants to, be a tyrant, or they want all the control in the world, have at it. Because guess what? Maybe I'm one of those people who this job affords my rent and my paintbrushes and my paint. And as long as I have food on the table and a roof over my head and an opportunity to paint when I am at home by myself and on the weekend, that's what matters to me, right?
Absolutely. So I'm just you're giving us some pause for thought, Mike. We're a long way into this conversation now around executive alignment, and it's taking us to places which isn't just about the idea of executives and executive teams being aligned. It's taking us to a place where, recognizing that everyone in the organization is never going to be completely aligned in the way that I might see it. Okay. um, and kind of learning to be okay with that, and so that element of individual alignment and individual contribution becomes validated, and people feel better as a result of it. So I am really excited about this. I feel like I'm learning as I'm going, and sort of getting underneath some of this amazing work that you've been doing. So we're going to have a you know have a discussion about what comes up for us next.